was hot. Hot for July and hotter than anything he associated with England. The quarry walls seemed to hold the heat in as the sun beat down. He squinted. They had all been there a moment ago, 30-odd kids and sodding Mr. Rice, shouting about half a crown and counting to 100 as if it were a grand adventure. And then somehow, they were gone. He still could not work out how it had happened. At 99, he could hear them shifting around, snickering, waiting for him to take charge like he always did. At 100, they should have been asking him what to do next. Instead, there was nothing. No shuffling to his side, no Rice barking instructions, just the empty heat of the quarry and the silence. He swore under his breath. Trust Rice to come up with a stupid game no one could follow. Trust the boys to run off without thinking. It made no sense that they had vanished so quickly. Someone always lagged behind. It all felt a bit uncanny. He climbed out of the quarry, trying to push the irritation out of his chest, and weaved through the trees. He found a broad tree with a patch of shade, sat down, and pulled out his weights. 5 left. Good enough. He lit one, dragged on it hard, and let the smoke settle in the back of his throat. He leaned against the trunk, staring at the ground. A lousy half a crown, and they had all bolted. His eyelids drooped. He felt sleepy. Then a light pushed through the branches. Not sunlight, not a reflection, something sharper. It hit his eyes before he had time to turn away, a hard burst that made his vision tremble. He tried to shift his head, but it would not move. And in that brightness, he became aware of a presence on his left, then his right, more than one. Small shapes, close, as if they had stepped out of the heat without sound. David A. Haisell first approached the Armstrong case because of a radio recording. He had taped a call-in program several years earlier, and when he listened to it again, he realized that one of the calls on the tape did not sound normal. The radio program on Haisell's tape was a live phone-in show on station CFGM in Toronto, hosted by Ron Knight. Henry McKay, one of Toronto's well-known UFO investigators, was on the line with him. Listeners could call in and describe what they were seeing. One caller was Joseph Scott, an older man in Jackson's Point.
CFGM, you're on the air. Go ahead. Hello. Hello. I'm a senior citizen up here at Jackson's Point. Jackson's Point. Welcome to the program, sir. Thank you. If you want to see a UFO, there's one right in the sky right now. Well, what are you seeing, sir? Would you tell us? An object that looks like a Christmas tree in a triangle with blue, red, white lights flashing like a psychedelic nightclub.
The superintendent of a lodge and the superintendent's wife were standing with him and had also seen the object. Scott said they had watched one stationary object and 2 others that moved across the lake. He did not hear any aircraft in the area. He sure could recognize a plane at night, so this had to be something else. Henry McKay joined the conversation and questioned Scott about direction, angle, altitude, the appearance of the lights, and whether the object made any sound. Scott answered each question plainly. Knight thanked him, and the call seemed complete. At this point, another voice came onto the line.
Let me thank you very much for contributing to our program tonight. Thank you. Okay? And we'll say goodbye to you for the time being. Mr. Knight. Yes. May I interject?
The voice addressed McKay directly and said he wanted to speak with him. Knight asked who he was speaking to, and the caller identified himself as a ufologist of 15 years. Knight checked whether this was the same caller who had just spoken earlier, and the man said no. Knight pressed him to explain why he wished to speak to McKay.
I would like to speak to Mr. McKay. All right, you're there, are you, Henry? Yes, I am. Would you go ahead? Hello, Mr. McKay. Hello. How long have you been a ufologist? Well, I'm not, that's not the part right now. We're more interested in this actual sighting. Yes, we are, Mr. McKay, aren't we? Yes. And of course, we're interested too in your intellect in regards to these sightings and your comprehension of the totality of the analogy of ufology. What truth, indeed? Let us judge ourselves carefully, Mr. McKay.
Knight pressed him to explain why he wished to speak to McKay.
You're going to go ahead and carry on this type of a discussion with Mr. McKay. I must step in and get your full name and address and so forth, since we have all that from Mr. McKay. Would you mind giving that to us? I will get in touch with Mr. McKay in due future. Oh, no, well, you're on the air. Do you have any reason for not giving us your background, sir? I have a very strong reason.
The voice said he had a strong reason. Knight replied that the situation was unusual because the man was challenging McKay without introducing himself. The mysterious voice then gave his name, which in the book was replaced by a pseudonym. We will also call him Gerry Armstrong. Knight asked whether Armstrong doubted something McKay had said. Armstrong replied,
I underestimate his intellect. You underestimate his intellect in regards to ufology, yes.
Knight asked whether Armstrong knew McKay's work. Armstrong said yes. Knight asked whether McKay knew Armstrong. McKay said he did not think so. Armstrong admitted he did not know McKay personally. Knight then shifted the discussion. He told Armstrong that the goal of the program was to understand the object the callers described, not to promote belief or disbelief. He told Armstrong that the best approach was to gather the facts so listeners could draw their own conclusions. Armstrong agreed. Knight ended the call politely. Armstrong responded politely in return. The call ended without tension. After that call ended, the program continued for several minutes with conversation between Knight and McKay. Then another call came in.
CFGM, you're on the air. Go ahead. Yes, sir. This is Jack again. Oh, hi. Yeah, you probably pick up and Jackson's Point or something. You cracked the wheel. No, the fellow from Jackson's Point identified himself.
At that moment, the disruption began.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm at a loss to explain what has just happened on phone forum, really. For some reason, all of our lines were jammed, and we've had to clear all of the phone calls. I don't know, maybe someone from Bell Telephone could someday figure out what actually happened there. But Ian and I went through our normal process, and yet you heard the sounds, the distortion that occurred on the program, and I must apologize to you for it. We'll get right back to our calls again in the hope that that won't happen again.
As soon as Knight spoke Armstrong's name on air, a loud, pulsing beeping sound overtook the broadcast. This event is the pivot that brings Haisell into the story. When Haisell listened to the tape years later, he realized that the interference did not match routine telephone or radio faults. He considered whether the original broadcast had been interrupted by something more organized than a simple malfunction. After reviewing recent reports of telephone interference experienced by Toronto UFO investigators, he contacted Henry McKay to ask whether McKay remembered the incident. McKay said he did. He remembered the Armstrong call and the sudden interruption, but he had no explanation for it. Haisell then interviewed Ron Knight. Knight remembered the episode clearly, but said the station technicians had been unable to find any mechanical cause. Knight said that the interference did not resemble overload or line failure. The station engineer could not identify any equipment fault that would create that pattern of tones. To understand the signal better, Haisell obtained help from an electronics engineer. They ran the tape through a Tektronix oscilloscope. The test showed that the main beeping sound formed a repeated sequence of 336 bursts per minute. Beneath this was a mixture of different audio frequencies. After 13 seconds, a second set of bursts appeared, with a higher rate and frequencies between 400 and 500 cycles per second. That second set lasted 15 seconds. After that, the pattern stopped briefly, a short musical interruption appeared, and the program resumed. Haisell then compared the interference to the normal signal that is broadcast when a caller leaves a receiver off the hook. That signal has a different rhythm and a different waveform. The off-hook pattern measured about 250 bursts per minute and was much more symmetrical. The interference on the tape was not similar. From this analysis, Haisell concluded that the broadcast had been overridden by an electromagnetic source of considerable strength. It would have needed to be strong enough to match or exceed the station's outgoing signal, which the engineer estimated at roughly 100,000 watts. This raised a new question for Haisell. The interference had begun exactly when Ron Knight spoke the name Gerry Armstrong. Haisell wanted to know whether this timing was coincidence or meaningful. To explore this further, he returned to Knight. Knight said he had never asked a caller to identify himself before, but he had done so with Armstrong because the situation felt strange. The next day, Knight still felt uneasy about the call, and the matter had stayed with him for that reason. A few days later, Gerry Armstrong himself went to the station. He said he felt embarrassed about the tone he had used on air and wanted to apologize to Knight. Knight sensed that Armstrong seemed uneasy and that his account contained something Knight had not yet understood. During their conversation, Knight remembered that Armstrong had said on air that he had been a ufologist for 15 years. The way Armstrong responded made Knight think that Armstrong's background in the subject deserved further examination. Knight was sufficiently interested that he arranged to visit Jackson's Point to look into the sightings described by Joseph Scott, and to follow up specifically on the unexpected call and visit by Armstrong. After Ron Knight's visit to Jackson's Point to look into Joseph Scott's sighting, he continued to receive reports from people in the area. Within a short time, he had even seen his first UFO himself. When he opened his next radio phone and show, he told his audience that he wanted to talk about UFOs again. He explained that he did not usually take a tape recorder with him on these visits, but on the previous day, he had gone out because many callers from Jackson's Point had been reporting sightings. He wanted to see whether anything was visible. He said that around 3 o'clock, he had entered a recreation field where a small crowd had gathered. He mentioned that among the adults who claimed to see unidentified flying objects regularly, he decided to speak with a young girl who had got home from school only minutes earlier. He had chosen her because she had not been primed or warned by adults, and because she had had no time to be influenced by anyone else's account. The girl was 11-year-old Pamela Armstrong, Gerry Armstrong's daughter. Ron had already heard about a sighting the family had reported a few days earlier, and he wanted to hear Pamela's independent description. Ron asked her to describe the sighting that had impressed her the most. She had been upstairs watching television in her sister Wendy's bedroom. Wendy had called from the stairs, and Pamela ran to the window. She looked out and saw a UFO passing by. She said it had a round shape on the underside, with something like a dome on top. She said it had large car lights, 2 large red lights, and 2 other lights shining downward. She estimated that it was about 200 feet up. Ron asked whether it looked large, and she said yes. He asked whether there had been more than one, and she said that another object had also passed by. The second one had only been a blinking red light that moved over the golf course. Ron asked whether she had been afraid. She said no. Ron realized that this matched very closely with what the parents had already described. He told Haisell this made him think there was more to the interview than met the eye, and made him want to follow up on it. Although he did not describe the object he himself had seen at Jackson's Point while speaking to his radio audience, he told Haisell what had happened. A few weeks after speaking to Pamela Armstrong, Ron and his wife Pat visited the Armstrong family socially. Everyone was sitting in the living room when, without warning, Mrs. Armstrong suddenly stood up, put on her coat, and walked outside without speaking. Ron thought this was odd, but he did not ask any questions. They simply waited a few minutes. Ron remembers that when the conversation reached a natural pause, Mr. Armstrong made a light remark about his wife, saying that she probably felt the need to go outside. In a few minutes, Mrs. Armstrong returned and asked Pat if she wanted to see something. She then went outside again. They all went with her. Outside, they found her looking at a light in the sky about 100 yards away. Ron said that at first he did not see anything. Then he noticed a red glow behind the trees. The glow grew brighter and rose until it was just above the treetops. He saw a large orange glowing ball at least 30 feet across. It stayed in the air for a few seconds and then rose in a smooth arc until it was directly below the moon. Then it disappeared. Ron was struck by what he had seen. He had not expected to see anything during the visit. The next day, he phoned the Dunlop Observatory in Richmond Hill to ask whether it might have been a known object. They told him that the time and trajectory did not match Skylab, and they concluded that it must have been a UFO, with the qualification that they could not specify what it was. Haisell then asked Ron what he thought of Gerry Armstrong in light of everything that had happened. He wanted to know whether Ron thought Armstrong sounded eccentric during the phone call. Ron said Armstrong had seemed sincere. He said the entire family appeared pleasant and intelligent. He said that they did seem worried about certain things that had happened to them in the past few years, and that when Haisell pressed him about these events, he advised Haisell to visit the Armstrongs himself. Haisell had already planned to do this, but before he could proceed, Ron told him something that surprised him. Armstrong had mentioned something far more serious than the other sightings. He had referred to a period of 7 hours in his youth that he could not remember. Something had happened, but neither he nor anyone else had been able to account for his whereabouts during that time. Upon meeting the Armstrongs myself, David tells us in his book, I was surprised to find them in their mid-30s, surprised because Gerry had sounded much older on the radio show. They appeared to be very friendly and receptive to my visit, and I immediately felt at ease. Their comfortable, well-decorated home and expensive late-model car, indicating they were financially well off, would motivate some UFO investigators to classify them as reliable witnesses. I don't subscribe to this characterization, but I was relieved for reasons previously mentioned to find that both husband and wife were very articulate. The following is a description of the first in a series of incredible events which have interwoven themselves in the life of the Armstrong family. We present his words here to convey the experience as he described it to David Haisell. The first incident took place in England in the summer of 1953 when I was 12 years of age. In fact, it was almost 13. I was a student at Hazeltine School, which is in Sydenham, a tough part of London. It was at the end of July. Classes had finished for the year, but my mother had given me permission to go to a summer camp for 10 days with several of the teachers and students from the school. I can still remember the names of some of the teachers and students. There was a Mr. Ashby who taught art, and Mr. Rice who was a science teacher. This one particular day, we'd all just finished lunch. There were about 30 or 40 of us kids, and the dishes had been cleared away, and we were all ready for an afternoon trip. At 12:30, we left the camp and headed out into the hills, as it were. We went through woods and forests and quarries. It was a general hike. At about 1:30, we came to what was a quarry to the best of my recollection, and we started to climb down into it. Mr. Rice went first, and I can remember him slipping and getting a chorus of cheers and other such remarks from the kids. We all eventually made it to the bottom and sat around for a bit. Then Rice put his hand in his pocket and pulled out a half a crown and said, "Okay, you guys, I want all of you to cover your eyes and count to 100. Those that can count that far, that is. And the first guy that finds me gets to keep this half a crown, and I don't want any cheating." At that time, I was definitely the leader. Whatever I did, the mob would follow me. But at that point, and this I can't understand, at the beginning of the count to 100 when Rice left, I became devoid of all emotions, different from everyone and everything around me. It was as if the event was starting to take over. At that point, I can remember the guy counting the last two numbers, 99, 100, and normally at that point it would have been, "Okay, Gerry, what we gonna do?" But it wasn't. They just dissipated. they vanished. It seemed one of the vastest craters on the planet Earth, wondering why everyone went away without asking the boss of the gang what decision to make. Whether to go for half a crown or let Rice get lost while we all stayed behind and had a few smokes. I remember climbing up the side of the quarry. It was pretty rugged ground and I weaved my way in between tall trees. I can't remember how long I walked or what thoughts were going through my mind. It was very warm. It was hot for July. In fact, it was hot for England. I remember sitting down under a tree. I had 5 weights, English cigarettes, and a book of matches, my only possessions at the time. Weights come in packs of 5. So I sat down under the tree and pulled out my cigarettes. I used to smoke furiously, even at that age. I lit up a cigarette. And I distinctly remember asking myself, why? Why had everyone gone? What are they playing hide and seek for? For a lousy half a crown. And then nothing. Blackness. Dark. Very, very dark. Voices. "Over here," was the first thing I heard. "Over here, Mr. Rice. Found him, sir. But that cigarette out, Gerry. Rice is coming." And this is the crazy thing. I had my cigarette and it was still burning, and I still had 4 left in my pack. Then, through a maze of bushes and darkness, and what seemed extreme blackness, came a series of floundering bodies from all directions. Rice loomed over me and exclaimed, "Where the hell have you been, Armstrong?" "Here. I've been here all the time," I replied. Except I was confused. Why was it dark? It was only about 8 o'clock. Why was it black? I didn't ask anyone the time. Someone just said, "It's way past 8 o'clock, Gerry," at which point nothing made sense. I was too confused. And I just managed to put the cigarette out. I was frightened because you're not supposed to smoke. I told Rice that I didn't know what had happened, that I'd been there all the time and that I guess I'd fallen asleep and that I was sorry. And he said, "Look, Armstrong, you've been running around because we've been past here before. We've been covering this ground now for the last 3 hours." They'd all been looking, teachers, students, camp officials, and others, and they'd passed by that particular point before. They had all returned to the camp at 4 o'clock, not realizing that I was missing, and it was not until supper time at 5 that someone noticed I was not there. On the way back to the camp, I definitely felt like I wasn't physically touching the ground. I must have been, of course, or someone would have said, "Hey, Gerry, you're floating." But I couldn't feel anything. I was being supported on both sides by 2 people, probably teachers. I don't remember, because I couldn't walk at all. And I had this terrible burning here, at the back of my neck. It was really bugging me. It really hurt. One of the teachers on the way back noticed me trying to put my hand up to the back of my neck, and for some reason, he wanted me to see the camp doctor. This makes sense to me now, but at the time, I couldn't understand why. I remember going into the doctor's office still in a fog. Everything seemed misty, like in a dream state, and I couldn't feel anything. He laid me on the exam table, and I couldn't feel the exam table. He checked my reflexes. Can't remember if they worked. And then he looked into my eyes and said to the teacher that there was something wrong with them. Dilated, I think. I don't remember. But he made a big deal over my eyes and seemed to run around in circles trying to do something. But I had no pain at all except for this burning sensation right at the back of my neck. He then looked me over on the stomach and I heard him say, "Ah, this may be your problem. It looks like he did have sunstroke." Well, you know, I'd been sitting under a tree though, but I was in no position as a 12-year-old kid to argue. I didn't know what I had. But that was the best prognosis that anyone could come up with, in my opinion, at that time. There were about 3 or 4 other people mingling about in the room, and they all went to examine this spot on the back of my neck. They all mumbled that it was definitely red and sore, and the doctor got some cotton batting and rubbed something on it and made a great big fuss over it. And then a teacher and a couple of the guys took me back to the dormitory, and I remember all the guys asking what had happened. I just brushed it off and said I must have fallen asleep. And that was it. Remember, I was 12 and it didn't seem important, not to me or to any of the other guys. I was still confused, but I fell into a deep sleep on my bunk immediately. And when I woke up the next day, things just carried on as usual, and the incident was forgotten. I completely forgot about it. We came home from summer camp and my life just carried on as if that event never happened, and that's how it all started. When you say you completely forgot about the event, do you mean you put it out of your mind? David Haisell asked. No, I completely forgot it. It was as if it had never happened. It didn't come back to me until 10 years later, replied Gerry. What made you remember it? That, said Gerry, is another story, and we were off again. It was about 11:31 p.m. in late 1963. We were living in London, England, in a place called Forest Hill. I was already married to Susan, and the girls were about a year old at the time. I was going upstairs to bed and I stopped on the landing and looked out of the window. We had one of those landing windows, you know. It was one of our early old homes. And I remember looking at this star. For some reason I was attracted to it. I don't know why. I'd never read anything about stars or flying saucers or that. I knew what a star was about, but I just couldn't have cared less. And as I was looking at this star, it started to send out what I can only describe as rings or ripples. Like you get when you throw a pebble into a pool of water, you know, and out they extend as it moved. Just as those ripples began, it dawned on me. I knew it wasn't a star, but I didn't know what it was, except that it was moving and it was coming towards the house. Then I called Susan and said that there was something in the sky and that it seemed to be coming towards the house. She came out to the landing, saw it, and suggested we go down to the living room and open the window to get a better look. So we did, and upon opening the window we heard the sound. It was a low, pulsating, droning sound that alternately became louder and then softer. Gerry then tried to imitate the sound, and the closest thing David Haisell could think of that sounded similar was a large number of bees in a swarm. Then it started to get larger and larger as it came toward us, still sending out those ripples. And at that moment I remembered. I remembered what had happened to me 10 years before. For the next hour, it continued to hold us transfixed. And during the course of this hour, I remembered the details of what I have just told you, about the missing 7 hours. I remembered all the sounds and the voices and the sights. I remembered the quarry, Mr. Rice, everything. But I didn't remember what happened during the 7 hours, and then I told Susan, I went missing once. Then the thing slowly drifted away and disappeared. We still hadn't put a label on it. We hadn't called it a flying saucer or a UFO. Neither of us labeled it that night. We went upstairs to bed and Susan wanted to know more about the time I went missing. So I told her. All she said was that I must have been a nut. I said, yes, perhaps I was, and we went to sleep just like that. The next morning we began to talk about it. I said, what the hell was that thing anyway? And now we immediately labeled it after remembering it. And I said, why did I remember I went missing when I saw that thing? And right away I was into the car and down to the library. I came back with the books I could find on flying saucers, which was the common term then rather than UFOs. And from that moment on, things went haywire. Events just started happening to us. Gerry telephoned Bufora, the British UFO Research Association, and described what had happened, stressing his sudden recall of the missing 7 hours which the sighting had triggered. Bufora sent out 2 investigators, one a professor of something, and the other Gerry described as a strange young girl. At the time, she seemed strange to the Armstrongs because she kept insisting that they must be special people. She felt that they had been chosen for something, but she didn't say by whom or for what. The professor wasn't interested in Gerry remembering the 10-year-old event. He was concerned only with the physical aspects of the sighting, the longitudes and latitudes, for example. The whole Bufora investigation left the Armstrongs completely unsatisfied. By now, David Haisell realized that he had to come up with a plan of attack. He had already listened to Gerry Armstrong's account of the missing 7 hours, spoken with his wife Susan, and reviewed the events that had unfolded around the family since the early 60s. He had also traced the attempts by earlier investigators to make sense of the case, including the abrupt involvement and equally abrupt withdrawal of Bufora. What he needed now was a way to proceed that did not simply repeat the mistakes of others. Haisell began by stripping the case to its foundations. If Gerry and Susan's story was going to hold up under scrutiny, it had to survive the most basic challenges. He considered whether the whole thing could have been fabricated, but nothing about the Armstrongs suggested hoaxing. They shunned attention, offered no sensational claims to the public, and consistently downplayed what had happened to them. Haisell knew how rare that attitude was among supposed hoaxers, and he dismissed the idea. He then asked whether two people might simply have been mistaken about what they saw on that evening in 1963. It was possible, he conceded, to misinterpret a light or a distant object. But both Gerry and Susan had watched the thing for more than an hour and had given matching descriptions. The length of the observation alone argued against misperception. And the most uncomfortable question remained: how does a misidentified object resurrect a memory that had been sealed away for a decade? By the time Haisell returned home that evening, he had clarified the structure of his investigation. He would not begin with hypnosis, nor with speculative theories, nor with forcing Gerry into a memory he might not be ready to face. Instead, he would assemble the broader context, compare cases in the region, evaluate gentler recall methods, and let Gerry advance at a pace that would not harm him. The mystery of the 7 missing hours remained unresolved, but Haisell now had a direction: follow the pattern, protect the witness, and approach the truth without breaking the person who carried it. To understand the Armstrong case, David Haisell dug into the family's earlier history and found that their strange experiences did not begin in the 1970s. They stretched back decades. In 1959, before their first confirmed UFO sighting, Gerry and Susan saw what Gerry later described as a huge orange-red fireball in a field near Ramsgate. A few years later, during a holiday at Jaywick Sands, they were surrounded on the beach by drifting blue and white lights. "They were all over the place," explained Gerry. "The whole sky seemed to be full of them. They were moving around us, seemingly at random. Although we had seen our first UFO by this time, we still didn't know what to make of these lights. They weren't like anything we had seen or even read of before." By the early 1960s, the pattern widened. Strange knocking sounds followed Susan around the house with no identifiable source. Taps turned themselves on and off. The activity felt like poltergeist phenomena, although neither of them had any interest in anything paranormal at the time. The most dramatic early episode came in 1967. Gerry left Sidcup on a short business errand and somehow ended up miles away on the coast at night, standing in a mud field with glowing orange lights all around him, with no clear memory of how he had arrived there. His suit and shoes were soaked. He felt disoriented, and he could not retrace the route he had taken. A local paper reported a wave of UFO sightings over Britain that same night. Haisell used these earlier incidents to establish a long-running pattern, showing that whatever was happening to the Armstrongs did not appear suddenly or as a single isolated event. It was part of their lives long before the missing 7 hours became the center of the investigation. For Haisell, the escalating encounters were important, but they were background. The deeper mystery, the one he kept circling back to, was the moment in 1953 when Gerry Armstrong vanished from the world and returned unable to account for nearly a third of a day. Everything else, no matter how strange, was orbiting that central question. When Haisell finally returned to the question of Gerry Armstrong's missing 7 hours from 1953, he approached it with the one method Gerry was willing to try: the pendulum technique. Hypnosis still frightened both Gerry and Susan, but curiosity about the blank period in Gerry's childhood had reached a point where doing nothing felt worse than taking a chance. The experiment took place in the Armstrongs' family room. Gerry had practiced relaxation beforehand, and Haisell had prepared a carefully sequenced list of questions. The goal was simple: establish clear yes, no, I don't know, and don't want to answer movements, test them on events they already knew, and only then push into the unknown. At the start of the experiment, the pendulum simply did not respond at all. Haisell repeated the first question several times and got nothing, not even a tremor. That led him to notice something practical. Gerry was holding the pendulum in an awkward, uncomfortable position, his arm angled in a way that probably made it hard for any involuntary micro-movement to register. Haisell repositioned Gerry's arm so it could rest naturally, but even then the pendulum stayed completely still. Because the necklace pendant they were using was heavy, Haisell suspected the weight itself might be preventing motion. They then swapped it for something lighter. Still no result. By this point, Haisell was beginning to doubt the entire attempt. They paused. Gerry went through his relaxation routine again, this time more deeply. Only after this break, once Gerry was physically comfortable, holding a lighter pendulum and fully relaxed, did the pendulum give its first clear movement. After that initial motion, the pendulum began responding steadily and consistently, with distinct patterns for yes, no, I don't know, and I don't want to answer. The first set of questions concerned events they already knew from Gerry's childhood: Hazeltine School, the summer camp, Mr. Rice, the quarry. The pendulum answered each of these correctly, matching Gerry's earlier verbal accounts. This served as a calibration. Only after this did they turn to the hours that Gerry could never remember. Across the next hour, a detailed picture emerged, but not spoken by Gerry, but spelled out through the pendulum's motions. According to the responses, Gerry had stayed behind in the quarry after the other children left. Something approached him. It was the size of a small child. There were more than one. They did not walk the way humans do. Did they glide? Brought a clear positive response. Bit by bit, Haisell probed for characteristics that might match other cases. The pendulum agreed that they communicated with Gerry, and that Gerry attempted to communicate back. When asked whether the beings had mouths, the pendulum reacted violently with, "I don't want to answer," a response more emotional than anything earlier. Yet the next question, "Did they communicate to you with their mouths?" brought a positive answer, implying that the beings did have something mouth-like, even if the memory was disturbing. The session then aligned with recurring dreams Gerry had described for years. The chair with the triangular back, the entity instructing him to push a button, the life review displayed like a screen, and the feeling that his emotions had been drained away. "Did this actually happen to you?" brought a steady, positive response. Not everything pointed to a classic abduction framework. When Haisell asked whether Gerry had been physically examined, the answer was negative. But questions about the back of Gerry's neck brought a positive response, linking the craft encounter to the unexplained burning sensation Gerry experienced afterward. One particular detail stood out: Gerry's missing emerald cross, lost at the camp swimming pool the next day. The pendulum indicated that he had indeed worn it into the craft, and that they had taken it. Gerry had searched for that cross for years without ever finding it. As the session continued, Gerry began showing fatigue, and the pendulum weakened. The final questions confirmed only one last detail. The cigarette he had been smoking when the encounter began was still burning when he returned, suggesting the experience took place over hours, even though Gerry's physical context had barely changed. David closed the session by saying, "Well, I guess that is about it for now." At this point, Gerry, who had had his eyes closed for some time, opened them and, leaning forward in his chair, asked, "Did you get anything?" "We seem to have received a good indication that something did definitely happen," David replied. "Weren't you aware of the answers you were giving?" "No, I don't even remember the questions. The last thing I remember you asking was about Mr. Rice, and after that, nothing." "If you like, I will read the questions which I asked you, along with your responses," David suggested to Gerry. "Okay," he agreed. So David started with the question about Rice and the events taking place in the quarry, but when he reached the one which asked about the size of the being approaching him while he was sitting under the tree, Gerry suddenly cut him off. Gerry didn't want to hear any more. He became extremely agitated and began pacing up and down, apparently afraid to hear what had happened to him. As it stood, it looked as though the possibility that he would want to go ahead with regressive hypnosis was pretty remote. When David left that evening, Gerry had settled again, but was not willing to broach the subject any further. David left a copy of the questions and his responses with Susan in case he later chose to look at them. It was several months before this actually happened. For David, regressive hypnosis now seemed to be justified as a viable next step, in determining the details of what actually took place during the missing 7 hours. David Haisell ended his investigation in February 1978, 1 year after he had begun. The remaining obstacle was unchanged: the missing 7 hours in Gerry's childhood. Without Gerry's consent to regressive hypnosis, there was simply no method by which Haisell could examine that event directly. The rest of the case could be documented, compared, and tested, but its core remained sealed. What Haisell did not know was that this situation would eventually shift. Gerry later agreed to the regression sessions he had once refused, producing material that Haisell had been unable to obtain during the original inquiry. When Journal UFO, Volume 1, Number 1 appeared in 1979, it marked Haisell's formal return to the case. His editorial made clear why the new material mattered. Most UFO research was scattered, often distorted by speculation, and rarely accompanied by primary source documentation. By publishing the full regression transcripts, Haisell aimed to provide exactly what he believed the field lacked: verifiable data rather than rumor, and a record that readers could evaluate themselves. We now turn to those recovered details. The regressive hypnosis sessions were conducted in Toronto on July 19th and 26th, 1978. The hypnotherapist declined to have his name released. He explained to Haisell that, if identified, he would immediately be inundated with requests from people wanting hypnosis or wanting to report experiences, and he preferred to avoid that. What Haisell was able to clarify is that the clinician was a fully qualified medical psychiatrist, holding a medical degree. He was a Canadian specialist certification in psychiatry and a doctoral degree in his field. In other words, the sessions were carried out by a mainstream accredited physician, not a fringe practitioner. A link to the complete regression transcripts as published in Journal UFO is included in the episode description. The hypnotherapist began by anchoring Gerry in familiar ground: his age, his school, and the ordinary details of daily life. Gerry responded without difficulty. "Is this your birthday?" "Yeah." "Who's with you now?" "Nobody. I'm in my bedroom." He identified his school, Hazeltine, and his level, Form B. When asked to move forward in time to the summer of 1953, his breathing shifted. The clinician placed him at school camp, surrounded by teachers and classmates. "What are you looking at?" "Mr. Rice. He used to slap me around the face. Don't like him much." Gerry described camp as having a lot of fun, estimating they had been there about 3 days. Nothing unusual had happened yet. He felt physically well. The therapist then directed him to the day the children played hide and seek. Gerry's tone changed. "Ricey offering 2 and 6 pence. I don't want to play with Rice. Stupid idiot fool." When the second regression session began on July 26th, 1978, the clinician instructed Gerry to stay in the present while recalling the events from the summer of 1953. Gerry said he remembered them. When asked to describe what he recalled, he began breathing heavily and mumbling indistinctly. He said he remembered sitting under the tree. "Yeah, 'cause I went for a walk," he added, shifting briefly into dialect. "I went for a walk. 'Cause I didn't want to play hide and seek with Ricey. I'm going to have a fag. Going to have a fag and sit under a tree." He paused, then exclaimed, "Oh yeah, what's that? Something came down. Oh, I can't move. A light. A light." He repeated the word as his breathing quickened. "A light. And 2 blokes coming. They're coming. No. They come from another spaceship. They're picking me up. I can't move. Can't move my legs. Making me walk. I don't want to go." He began sobbing. "Oh. Pressuring on me neck. Oh. Things moving. We're going. Oh, I can walk now." He said he was in a room now. "Gone. Ain't no electric light bulb. Can't see a bulb. This noise, I want to get out of here. Want to get out." Asked where he was now, Gerry said, "In another room. Oh, my 'ead hurts in here. Were they gone again?" They keep coming and going and coming and going and mucking about. The clinician asked what they were asking him. Gerry said, they're not asking me anything. No, they ain't. He said the pain came when one of them looked at him. When one of them looks, it hurts, and he says not to be frightened. I'm not frightened, but it just hurts when he looks at me. He trailed off, then said, he's good. He's very clever. The clinician asked him to describe the being. Gerry said, he's magic. He makes the pain go away when he looks at me. Then he talks to me. He's got a funny face. I don't know whether they're bloody boys or girls. They're funny. They're nice, though. Pleased with me. When asked what the being just said, Gerry replied, chosen ones. Now he was telling me, yeah, that was good. Then he described being helped off a chair. Getting up off the chair, that was good. He said he saw pictures on a screen, though he didn't understand how they were shown. When asked what was happening now, Gerry said, a little ball. That's a planet. Well, oh blimey, is that right? He then said the being wanted him to go back. I don't want to go back. No, I like it here. He added that the being talks with thought. All things are thought. He was told to move forward. They're so different. I can't tell you. I can't tell you in words. He described the rooms. The first room was empty after the ladder. We went up the ladder. We went to the first room. And they just left me alone. And I remember. And then they came in. And we went into another room. And they kept just taking the pain away. He described being shown things. I actually remember swearing. They explained many things. They're putting something on I'm feeling better. I was very frightened, and now I became relaxed. I'm being put into a room. I think it's a room. I'm trying to understand where the light is from. It's very, very interesting, and now they're coming back. When asked what they looked like, Gerry said, the two that took me to the ship are a little taller than I am. They have, whitish gray skins? But they have very it's difficult to explain. Very small mouths. I see their eyes are more prominent than anything. They appear to be able to communicate whatever they wish. Now they're taking me in a corridor. It's like a semicircle. One is in front and one is behind. And one seemed to walk through a wall, but there must have been a door, and I follow. And there is another, and he is just standing. He is in red. He is in red and he is taller. He looks, could it be older? He says, my son. Gerry giggled. He said, my son. The clinician told Gerry to think about what the figure looked like and to keep that image in his mind. Gerry said he could see it. The clinician explained that he would count backwards from 3 to 1, and that as he counted, the figure would change into something that represented what it symbolized for Gerry. Gerry was told to picture it and watch it change as the count began. 3, 2, 1. Gerry said, teacher. Yes, his form is the same. He only says to teach. The clinician asked what that meant. Gerry said, he's telling me with feeling to go, to look. I can't feel the ground. Not the ground, it's the floor. And I'm looking. I can't believe it. I can't believe it. The clinician instructed him to go back to the memory of seeing the ship come down and to picture it. Gerry said he could see it. When asked what it looked like at first glance, he said, it's very bright. So bright, the shape is almost indescribable. After a pause, the clinician asked where the extra cigarette had come from after the experience was over. Gerry answered, not over. There's more to tell. Later moments. The clinician asked him to tell the later moments. Gerry said, I have to get back into the ship to tell. The clinician told him to go back into the ship. Gerry breathed heavily and said, "Now he thinks things. To look. I see. He says to see a ball. He says, he does not say, he feels. This is where I'm from. I don't believe this. I don't believe I'm there. But he says yes. He says yes, and for me to be calm. He's touching me, I feel. I thought it was a dream." Gerry said everything stopped. It stopped. The noise stopped. "He says to come, my son." "Huh. Come, my..." "He walks, I follow. There are others. We walk. We went down a ramp. It looks like a ramp. We're walking. Yeah. There's a door. It just opens. There's a dome. My God, there's a dome. And there's other children. There's children. They're talking to children in... I can't believe it, but I must be calm," he says. "To be calm and to follow. I see. I see it so vividly." He says to look at the screen. "It's here, in my hand. They put... It really isn't like a screen, it's like a ball. My life. There. So quickly." Gerry said the beings were thinking again. He's thinking again. Two of them think. To be calm. To understand. To be taught. He then said, "She. Now there is a woman. I didn't see her come from anywhere, though." Gerry continued, "There's still children coming. Going. They're not thinking, I'm looking. Through the dome, and it's mauve. I see it's mauve. And the colors. Oh, there's things passing over. My God, there's ships. I can't believe this. It must be a dream. She is thinking now. This is incredible. She's touching me. She's taking the cross." The clinician asked what cross. Gerry said, "I had a cross I stole. I stole from my mother. It was a silver cross with emeralds. She has taken it. She's looking at it. She's handing it to the other one in red. Why would she say that? It is not. She is talking. It is not right. That is not right to worship." He is thinking the same. They both say, "Not right to worship." Look at the screen. They think. They feel to me. There are many. They must put things right. Things are wrong. There was a mistake. I see the screen. They say to think on the screen. It's more like a ball. Pictures are so vivid. Not to worship. I see all things. They think these things. To put things right now. Time. It's all there. Soon to understand the difference. Many. They think on the screen. As the session continued, Gerry described a sequence of impressions that moved rapidly between perception, interpretation, and the being's communications. He reported that many others had been present before him. Many have been, come to this place, gave wrong ideas, must be changed, in time, will be understood in later. The message he said he received was that he was not unique, not to be special. There are many. Do not think you are special. There are many. Despite the confusion, Gerry maintained that he could perceive what they were communicating. These things they think. I see all things. He then shifted to the behavior of the beings around him. According to Gerry, they tell me these things. They say to go. They smile. He reported feeling a calmness in response. I am smiling. I feel at peace. He noted that others were present as well. There are others. They're coming and going. All of them. Moments passed in which he questioned their prohibitions on worship. Their response, he said, was unequivocal. They say it is not right. Gerry described being led through the structure, stating, "We are now walking. They are still thinking. We are at a different door. Now I see. There are many here. The occupants varied. Some look the same. Others are very different." He interpreted the encounter as having an instructional character. It must be understood, to teach. He was told to disregard the presence of others. Do not take notice of others that you may feel, see. He struggled to interpret what he experienced. I can't understand, feel, see. He repeated that they insisted upon future contact. They say we, will again, see, come, and admitted his confusion. I don't understand. As the session continued, he reported renewed mental activity among the beings. They're thinking again at the door. More individuals appeared. There are others here, again, other moments, and I shall recall when the moment is right. He said they communicated that recognition in the future would come through a sustained feeling. He tried to explain his own limitations within the experience. I'm so little, and I do not understand much. But he also said he was reassured. He understands. According to Gerry, the being told him he would understand more in the future. Later moments you'll be able to explain. The session ended with Gerry describing physical contact. He is touching my head. He ended by asserting the reality of the experience as he lived it. I know it isn't a dream. Gerry says he can see the faces, and now I sleep. After a long pause, he continues, back. They're carrying me back. I can't seem to walk. They're putting me back under the tree. He describes thinking that he is very frightened. He worries that Mr. Rice will wonder where he went. The beings are still speaking. They are saying words. I don't understand that word, that feeling. They're saying, my son, meet again, with others. He follows their movements. They're going through. There they go. They're going to the ship, and it just goes. He sighs. It is still light. He remembers the cigarette. Cigarette. I smoked the cigarette. It's getting darker. He thinks he fell asleep. He recalls 2 boys from camp. Bertie Brain and Colin. They found me first. Huh. Poor Col, he's really upset. I guess I fell asleep, Col. I'm sorry. He says he told Mr. Rice he could not walk very well. The scene shifts again. They're taking me back. I can't feel the ground. Yeah, now I see they're checking me over. They don't seem to really know what they're doing. He remembers telling them he was hungry after what he calls a checkup. They gave him jelly and ice cream. I was really hungry. He struggles to hold the memory. I'm trying to remember, but I want to go back to the bunk, and I want to fall asleep. He insists on the importance of what he has seen. And I must remember. I shall always remember. I shall never forget. Then his voice softens, as if drifting away. But I shall sleep now. Taken together, the regression material and Haisell's editorial summary outline a coherent set of claims about what Gerry Armstrong believed occurred during the missing 7 hours. The account describes a structured sequence: an encounter near the tree, forced movement toward a lighted clearing, transport by small beings, entry into a craft, and exposure to multiple rooms, devices, and individuals. The details across the 2 sessions are internally consistent, including the descriptions of the beings, the dome containing other children, the spherical device used for instruction, and the repeated emphasis on calmness, non-worship, and the idea that Gerry was not unique. The editors note that Gerry's emotional responses, shifts in dialect, and physiological reactions under hypnosis were stable indicators of recall rather than invention. They also highlight the rapid fading of conscious memory following the event, and Gerry's immediate difficulty integrating the experience into ordinary life. Although the interpretations of these claims remain open, the documentary value lies in the structure of the narrative, the consistency across sessions, and the presence of specific elements that Gerry did not consciously report prior to hypnosis. As always on Stories Lost, we invite you to make your own appraisal of the evidence. Please make up your own mind and join the conversation in the comments section. If you've made it this far in this extended episode, we want you to know that we genuinely appreciate your curiosity and your willingness to stay with all that remains unexplained. There were many details we could not cover in this episode. David Haisell's later work picks up those loose threads and pushes the story much further. If you want the full sweep of the investigation, his 2020 book, The Control Factor, delivers an extended account you should not miss. See you next week. Thanks for the coffee and supers. And thanks to our members and Patreons.